If you watched Stephen Miller's masterclass at the podium, you might have seen a familiar face at the White House press room. Watch.
We'll start with our new media seat today. Chris Bedford from the Blaze Media. Why don't you kick us off?
Thank you very much. Stephen, what is the end goal of the China tariffs right now? Is the idea to open up the Chinese markets through a deal to a better market for exporting American goods to China, or is it a reconfiguration of global trade in a way that isolates China from free countries?
Go. So China is a unique situation, obviously. The president has talked at length about what happened to us economically since China's entrance into the World Trade Organization and the trillions and trillions of dollars of trade deficits that we've racked up with China over the period of that time, and what that's meant for our national security, what that's meant for economic security, what that's meant for our supply chains. Obviously, right now, the Secretary of the Treasury is in the process of developing a plan that will answer the questions that you're talking about, but the president's goals have been very clear on these points, which is that he is not going to allow China to continue to steal our intellectual property, to continue to illegally dump and subsidize their goods in our markets, to manipulate their currency, to rack up an unsustainable trade deficit. We need to have a trade relationship with China that does not do harm to our nation's economic and national security.
Joining us now is the man himself, our Blaze Media D.C. correspondent, Chris Bedford. So, Chris, what was it like to not only just be at the press briefing, but also to be front and center of a briefing that went absolutely viral? This one, a lot of people are talking about this one right now.
Oh, it's always fun to go to the press briefings when they're really kicking off. It's particularly fun to have an assigned seat in the front row, especially because you sometimes get a little side eye for doing that, and to be able to kick off with the question. Now, of course, the worry is always trying to ask the right question. I had 10 questions I wanted to ask easily. I could have kept on going on a lot of different subjects, but he had opened up that point of view, that the discussion on trade in China just moments before, so it seemed ripe to try and figure out what exactly is our trade policy, and it turns out they're working on it. And it's also kind of just fun and wild to see Stephen up there. I was excited when he came out. I've known Stephen for 15 years. We used to have lunch once a week as part of a group, and he has always been a laser-focused person. He's never been the kind of guy who goes out after work and throws back a couple beers. He's always been laser-focused. He reads policy for fun. This has gone all the way back to him in grade school and high school. In college, he was a conservative media figure who was at the time saying this Duke lacrosse rape hoax is a complete and total hoax. He turned out to be right on that. So it's great to see him in this position, and it's good to be able to talk to him in particular because he differs from a lot of other members of different comms teams, which the White House comms does a ton of work, but they're rarely actually helping to shape policy in the way that Stephen Miller has been able to. So it's essentially talking to a principal and one of the more powerful people now for 2 straight administrations.
Miller, always a killer from the time he was in college until now. And now look at him go. So, I mean, so many questions. One is, what did you think of that answer? I mean, you just said they're working on it. What was the answer? Sort of both and?
Yeah.
Or what?
You'd kind of think that you would have a plan for trade war before you entered into it. And I really like that this administration has had a style of throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks. That's been interesting, but and generally it's paid off in a lot of different ways. But the United States, I think, ought to have a really serious trade policy with China. They are absolute thieves. They rip off intellectual property. They steal labor from their own citizenry. They lie about their economic numbers. They lie about everything, and they do it to be able to undermine the global economy and make it completely dependent on, frankly, the garbage that they sell worldwide. I can't stand it. It's become a thing in our house where Christopher, my 9-year-old, will yell about the rubber duckies saying, see, Dad's wrong. Not all Chinese crud is so bad. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see about that. I like Stephen's answers about lead paint in the dolls and other different safety standards and environmental standards, which are completely ignored in China. But in order for President, one thing that President Trump could do to help really secure the next century of American power is not do some neocon thing of send a bunch of aircraft carriers to Taiwan. We don't need to go to open war with China. The best way to defeat China, which is a atheist slave state undermining the United States' education system and economy, the best way to defeat them is to pull out of range of them. Stop doing business with them. Force American businesses to decide, what are they going to do? Are they going to allow Chinese spy operations and control over their boards and their decisions? Are they going to outsource their manufacturing at the cost of American jobs? Are they going to gut the American heartland of working jobs that are so essential to a man's soul and self-dignity, and then say, but I got you cheap things. You can buy them at Walmart or on Amazon, and if you're lucky, you can use your welfare check and your food stamps to do it. Look what a great policy we have. That's rotting for America. It's rotten for future generations. And any kind of serious trade policy I would like to see, and Miller hinted at this, fundamentally and forever alter the relationship with China on trade. Everything we've ever been told about it. It's going to open up the Chinese markets. We're going to have access to 1 billion consumers. That we're going to become more prosperous and more free. Every single thing about it has been a lie, and it's often been largely the reverse of that. It's empowered an incredibly corrupt regime. It's disempowered the United States. No one's allowed to sell products in China longer than they're able to steal that technology and then ban it and then hold their companies hostage. So ending that relationship and changing it, with which Miller said is the large end goal, and I was satisfied by that aspect, would be great. The only thing that I was a little less than pleased with was that they're working on a plan now. I thought that this is something that we could have figured out maybe over the 4 years in between his presidencies.
Well, Amazon stock price is down big today. I thought that my shopping alone would have kept it up, but it turns out that was not enough. But let's get back to Stephen Miller, because he was absolutely must-see TV today. And it's official now. DEI is out. Merit is back in. Let's take a look.
President Trump has ended across the entire federal government all hiring, recruiting, retention, promotion, and training based on race and sex. This includes in our law enforcement agencies. So, again, when we took office, even in sensitive law enforcement, national security, and intelligence agencies, we were hiring individuals not on their ability to carry a weapon, not on their ability to keep Americans safe, not on their ability to conduct sensitive intelligence operations, but based upon race and sex. And obviously, that is unacceptable.
So they're calling it a return to common sense in government hiring. What do you call it?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly great. And this was a question that I wish I'd had the opportunity to ask him about as well, because changing those hiring practices is phenomenal. But I'm curious if the administration is going to actually do the difficult work of reviewing hires and reviewing promotions over the last 4 years of the Biden administration and deciding which ones were actually made on merit. How many air traffic controllers do we currently have who were hired because they were Black females as opposed to the best person to possibly be in the air? How many different people were promoted throughout the federal government who were promoted because of their sexual orientation as opposed to whether they were the best person at the job? And would those people, if identified, either be released from employment or be demoted? That would be a much more difficult thing to do politically. I can see it in the front pages of the New York Times and all the sob stories and all the sadness. But it's been 4 years of incredible injustice. I'd like to see it undone. It's a great thing to see the federal government using the architecture of the civil rights regime, which has been weaponized largely against the American people for decades, to actually protect it and to understand it in the way that a lot of its authors believed and assumed, maybe foolishly, it would always be understood and always be legislated, but it hasn't been. That would be excellent. I don't think that conservative dream of ever undoing that sort of legislation and that architecture is really politically feasible, but I would like to see it used properly. And right before Trump left office in 2020, Bill Barr was working on some really interesting stuff, which I think would be important for undoing this in corporate America. He was providing the legal framework for wrongfully not promoted or wrongfully terminated or wrongfully not hired employees to be able to sue and to actually hold these different companies accountable. I mean, during 2020 and 2021, your chances of being hired, the chances of a white male in his 50s was one of the 100 people or so hired were negligible. The graph numbers that were put out, and I've seen them from top corporate forecasters of white middle-aged men who were being hired who were straight, were almost zero. It was very, very difficult time for those folks who lost their job during COVID and who fit that. There should be consequences for that. And not only that, but a lot of these corporations did it out of cowardice. I heard stories about partners at conservative leaning Texas business firms basically shaking with fear at these college students and struggle sessions they were put through by people who were screaming, I'm not even going to do the work for you. You need to do the work. You need to read this book. That's completely backwards. And giving them the tools to be able to sue, allowing them to point to the lawyers and say, listen, guys, I'm with you. I totally agree. No justice, no peace, yada, yada, yada. But the legal team won't let me do this, or the law won't let me do this, is a good out for actually trying to help retake corporate America.
So one of the things that struck me today is just we're getting used to it, but people still love the belligerence that Stephen Miller and the entire administration is showing against the press, right? I mean, he excoriated members of the media to their faces in that room today. Do you think, do you think looking around that room that people are just getting used to it? I mean, they're just getting used to taking the beat down. Is there still any sort of, shock or anger about it, or are they just sitting back and sort of taking it, used to it by now?
They're totally used to it. It's just part of the job now. I mean, he basically called the room of liars and moral cowards. And then as he left the stage, people were like, thank you, Stephen. We're back again soon. Which is, I thought it was kind of funny. I mean, no one was aghast. There was no gasps in the room. And a lot of the points that he made were completely correct about the stories that they chose to cover, when they actually chose to cover them, their obsession with one El Salvadorian gang member, which is just weird, I think, to the entire country. That's what the Democrats said about J.D. Vance. It's weird. It's just weird. This complete obsession, especially as more and more information comes out connecting him not only to MS-13, but to being violent domestically. Stephen's a master of it. You can tell when he walks out, and he's a very intelligent guy. He's a very intense guy. He's always been like that. I've never seen him relaxed. Even having a cigarette with the beer, I've never seen him actually fully relaxed. And he's just kind of confident. He's got that confidence that he's not going to be outwitted by any members of the press corps. And that may sound amazingly arrogant, but once you've actually hung out with these people and been forced to be in a room with them for 15 years, like I have, you realize it's actually not a difficult bet to assume that he's smarter than almost everyone in the room. The people who rise up in that room do so by generally doing their boss's wishes, by being palace guards, by protecting the democratic narratives. That's often what they do. But I also do notice a real total sea change in the press's attitude from the first Trump administration. Gone are the days of Jim Acosta screaming at every press conference. Gone are the days of Caitlin Collins yelling at the president about Russia during an Easter egg roll with children. There's a much more respectful and civil demeanor in the room. People raise their hand. They shout questions at the end, but of course you're always hoping that you can get that question in, especially when it's your job to sit there all day. So I've noticed that there's that change. Jim Acosta is now out of a show. And the reporters in general just have returned to a more civil sort of back and forth with the administration that is honestly refreshing to see.
I will say you are usually relaxed on the show. Yesterday might have been one of those rare occasions that you were not, but baby Josephine made her first TV appearance on the show. I have to ask you, what were the reactions like? Because I think my mom has a new favorite part of this show.
The reactions were fantastic. And you know what else I learned is that this microphone I've got here is actually pretty great. I watched the clip last night after the show aired, and you can't hear anything. You don't realize that she was squawking and hollering the entire time. It just seems like this cute little baby fluttering in the corner, and then I pick her up. And you know what? I'm glad I did, but I got to tell you, sometimes when you're in front of people you're giving a speech, you're talking, or you're on television, you might lose your train of thought. You kind of go into autopilot when something happens. I've been on TV when someone started drilling in the jackhammering the ceiling above me, or you're at a Trump rally and suddenly the music's extremely loud, and you kind of just have to go and turn your brain off. I've never done that for 15 minutes until yesterday. I look back, it's like, gosh, I hope I said the right things, because I was just so worried about the baby yelling and squawking. It turns out you couldn't hear a thing. We had a special guest, and I think even more than when Buster and Bobby jumped on the show one time, Josie, the human baby, might be the new favorite, the new fan favorite.
Absolutely the new fan favorite. She is welcome back anytime. If I can request it, let's bring her back on.